Welcome back to Women Writers in Chinese History. In this video, we'll look at women's images in early Chinese history, such as those reflected by China's earliest writings, the oracle bone scripts. First, let's look at some myths related to the beginning of dynasties in Chinese history. The protagonists of these myths are all men. They are often characterized as sage kings for their virtue and sometimes listed among the 5 emperors. In particular, there is a set of stories featuring the motif of ceding the throne, Shan Wei, preceding the beginning of China's first dynasty Xia. Basically, ceding the throne means the king's passing of his throne to the most virtuous man he could find rather than to his own son, which may reflect a primitive form of democracy. Specifically, the first sage king to do so is Yao, who passed his throne to Shun, a man renowned for his filial piety. We'll say more about his story later. Shun later passed his throne to Yu, who dedicated more than a decade of work to controlling flooding rivers. Women have very little presence in the stories about these sage kings. In the story about Shun, the paragon of filial piety, we do see the image of an evil stepmother who was partial to her own son and attempted at murdering Shun 3 times. Shun miraculously survived all these ordeals. More important, as a sign of his unconditional filial piety, he did not resent his stepmother and father for their vicious deeds. Whereas the stepmother is an evil woman in this story, the myth does indicate the ritual authority of a mother by position rather than by blood has over the son due to the code of filial piety. This kinship structure is important for understanding the power empress dowagers could wield in imperial politics. Also, in Shun's story, Yao married 2 of his daughters, E Huang and Nu Ying, to Shun, both as queens. This makes a rare example of 2 principal wives in Chinese history. The daughter's role in this political exchange, on the other hand, is entirely passive. As the story goes, after the last sage king Yu's passing, his ministers disobeyed his wish and established his son Qi as the new king, thus initiating China's first dynasty, Xia. The political model thus changed from the government for the common good, 公天下, to the government of a single family, 家天下. In Chinese dynasties, the throne was exclusively passed on to a male heir. China's only woman emperor, Wu Zetian, took over the throne only under very extraordinary circumstances, which we'll discuss later. After the Xia dynasty, there was the Shun dynasty and the Zhou dynasty. All these dynasties are very long. We know very little about the Xia dynasty and not too much about the Shun dynasty either. The Zhou dynasty, on the other hand, left many written sources and has a complex historical development. It also founded many basic characteristics of the later dynasties. We won't be talking about the Xia dynasty, since its history is quite nebulous. Yet we should take a look at the oracle bone scripts from the Shun dynasty and introduce a very interesting female figure from the period, Fu Hao. The oracle bone scripts, or Jiagu Wen, were the earliest known Chinese scripts and bear striking resemblance to Chinese characters used today. They were inscribed on tortoise shells or ox bones for divination purposes. Basically, the Shun court would perform these ceremonies by inscribing questions on prepared shells and bones, and then apply a heated object on them. Then a priest, often the king himself, would interpret the patterns of the cracks produced by heat as divine answers, and these interpretations would be added to the inscriptions. The oracle bone was a major archaeological discovery of the early 20th century. They were not known or seen during traditional period, even though there were some historical accounts about the Shun rituals. Large quantities of the oracle bones have been discovered in the number of 100,000. By deciphering the inscriptions, scholars have learned a lot more about the Shun history than before. For our concerns, let's briefly survey some oracle bone scripts related to the female gender. First and foremost, 女, the script that represents a woman, but could also mean a daughter. The script next to the picture is the oracle bone form. The other scripts are its various forms evolved through history until the modern character you might recognize on the right. As we can see here, the oracle bone script of Nu represents a kneeling position. During this time, the chair was not yet invented, and people often knelt down as a form of sitting. However, even if the woman is sitting here, the script indicates an idea of passiveness and subordination associated with the female gender in a culture which was already strongly patriarchal in nature. Next, let's look at the oracle bone script of Fu, which means a woman or a wife. This script represents a woman holding a broom, which indicates her devotion to domestic work. Likely, the limitation of women, especially married women, to the household had already started by this point. Whereas a number of oracle bone scripts related to women reflects the sign of a patriarchal culture, some retain traces of a matriarchal past. One interesting example is the character meaning surname, 姓. Even though surnames are a predominant sign of patrilineal descent, remarkably, the Chinese character is consisted of woman, 女, and birth, 生. This structure is already present in oracle bone script on the left. In the oracle bone script, we can clearly see that birth is represented by the image of a growing plant. The structure of this character likely came down from a bygone matriarchal past. Indeed, there is little doubt that Shun culture was already unambiguously patriarchal. Some oracle bone inscriptions are about childbirth, and there the birth of a son is recorded as auspicious or good, whereas the birth of a daughter is recorded as not good or not auspicious. However, just like the later periods, a strong patriarchy did not prevent some women from achieving extraordinary deeds or receiving power and prestige. In Shang Dynasty, one remarkable female figure of this kind is Fu Hao, who lived around 1200 BCE and was one of the 64 consorts of the Shang king Wu Ding. Fu Hao's deeds were known to us due to modern discovery of her tomb in the 1970s and interpretations of Shang oracle bone script inscriptions. Nothing has been written about her in traditional historical sources. Based on Shang oracle bone inscriptions, we know that Fu Hao was a warrior and a high priest. She even possessed the authority to interpret oracle bones and make inscriptions. In that sense, we can perhaps consider Fu Hao as China's first woman writer. Many treasures were found in her tomb, reflecting her high status. On this slide, we can see some delicate jade objects discovered in her tomb in shapes such as the phoenix and the elephant. What is more remarkable is a large bronze vessel dedicated to her with inscriptions inside. Bronze vessels are major ritual objects and usually reserved to the use of kings and nobility. The dedication of a bronze vessel to Fu Hao indicates her extremely high status during her lifetime, perhaps only next to the king of Shun himself. Here we reach the end of this presentation. And it's good for you to know that this is the last video of the week. Please complete the quiz questions below this video, and also pre-class reflections, which we're going to discuss in class. See you soon.